For this video, I'm going to review Chapter 11, the history and professionalization of interpreting. You should have paper ready to take notes because a lot of this information is not in your book, but also there will be some moments of self-reflection that I won't ask you to submit by answering separately, but if you answer the questions as they come up, and even if it's a scribble, if you end up drawing, whatever it is that you take as a moment to respond, I'd like you to submit a picture of that just so that we can see that we're all following along on this lecture and that you participated in those self-reflection questions. So let's start with the first question is why we must even learn about the history of the profession. Like, why is that even important to have a whole chapter dedicated to the history? It's really mostly the history of RID, and it touches on the organization from Canada, AVLIC. Why is that important for us to even consider and to read up on the history? Well, your book says that it makes you a more responsible practitioner. It also says it'll prepare you for the written portion of the certification exam, which is very true. And so a lot of students of interpreting who move on to certification, they do use the book. So you want to be an interpreter to study heavily for the written portion of the exam. And so as I had said in the early part of this class, this book will be your best friend. You will have to read it in and out. And so you're not just reading it for the purpose of this class, but you're reading it for your own advancement, for your own understanding, but also for your future so that you can take that certification exam. But what I like to add is why we have to learn the history of the profession is it helps shape your language and it helps shape the approach to applying the code of professional conduct. And it also helps you understand why we do the things that we do. A simple example. We are such a new profession. We've only recently, and I say recently, meaning in the history of time, we've only recently really been recognized as professionals who are paid to do um, a job that requires skill, training, and really the more experience you have, the more pay you can demand. And there's such a demand for the services. But but because it's so new, there's still a lot of misunderstanding and there's still a lot of people who expect you to volunteer or expect you to accept a low wage or even don't offer a staff job to sign language interpreters. And for that reason, because we're kind of overlooked, interpreters make every effort to distinguish themselves as professionals. And you will see the way interpreters dress, the way interpreters conduct themselves. You might think sometimes, okay, that's a little bit extra, right? Like maybe you see the interpreter in a college classroom always dressed professionally. Sometimes they're even dressed a little bit better than the professor. That's on purpose. They're really trying to emphasize I'm a professional in the room. I'm also a paid employee. I'm also providing a service and I'm not part of this classroom. I am not a student. I do not participate other than in this professional way of providing this access, this language access. And if you understand the history, the fact that it's so new and the fact that there are still people that don't understand or don't see us as a profession, then you'll understand why something so simple as maintaining your boundary, your ethical boundary, something so simple like dressing the part of a professional, following the code of professional conduct, it isn't so simple after all. It's actually very complex, and your part in it helps to shape the view of our profession. So it really helps to shape us as a whole, but also to continue to educate the world about this profession and also about the need. And in doing that, you will see, I, I have said before, and I may not have said it to your class yet, but you should be really proud that you are training in becoming an interpreter. And even for those of you who aren't in this class to become an interpreter, I still believe that this fundamental knowledge is really important to you in the service of the deaf community and in the service for people who use interpreters. You'll have a different understanding of what interpreters do and what they should and shouldn't do. Now, because of that training that you should take pride in, you will see that because there's such a demand for interpreting services, and because there's such a misunderstanding of, are we professionals? Are we trained? What's the requirement? There are people who are thrust into work and accept it, and they should not. And so you will distinguish yourself as a trained interpreter, and you'll be able to spot those who, I always say, there's a big difference between a signer and an interpreter. And there's also a big difference between someone who just kind of threw themselves in and someone who's trained. You will interpret with intention. You will have a different perspective, a different way of critically thinking about your work, and a different approach. And because of this split that I have added, number one and number two are in your book, but number three, that it'll shape your language and your approach to applying the CPC, is so valuable. And you should be proud. You should be proud that you're taking this time to invest in your future and invest in your training and education, because at the end of it all, you will come out a more professional, more prepared, and a more highly skilled interpreter, because you will have put that dedication into your professional practice and training. So I really believe that understanding the intricacy and the history and the language, and to be able to use the language of interpreting, will distinguish you. And it's also a reason why for this class, and it's not a me thing, it's in other classes of interpretation. I have asked you to wear professional dress when you're recording your videos. I want you to start thinking, looking, acting, but also speaking like interpreters. You have to start to use the language of interpreters in order to start to distinguish yourself. But also, you're at the very beginning of your career. You got to start acting like you're in it. So, because you got to, as we will see in this presentation, there's a big part of it that's proving yourself. And unfortunately, it's probably part of every profession out there, but we got to do it. And how do you do it? Again, to start speaking the language of interpreters and understanding the vocabulary, the nuances, and the why of why we do things. And a big part of that, again, is understanding the history of the profession. So, how did it all begin? How did we even come to serve the deaf community in this way as interpreters and as providing language access? Your book says that it started with people who had deaf parents or had deaf siblings. It was teachers of the deaf or even members of clergy. And if we think about this and also think about those of you who've taken deaf culture, it it really shows the lack of self-determination for the deaf community, and the lack of the just the freedom to be independent, because there's no access provided by law. There's no access uh, or even consideration of being accessible for the deaf. So just why do you think that why do you think that it all began that way? It probably was if I think about it, now I don't have any deaf family members. I am a student of interpreting, and I learned interpreting in college. I learned sign language in college. And if I think about it, um, people must have felt compelled to serve the community. They felt some kind of tie to the community, and it was a way of giving back. And so we talked previously about how this profession and this community has a strong sense of giving back. Um, and we can see it in the history from the beginning of how it started. But don't misunderstand that even though the community is giving back, it doesn't mean that it felt great to be forced to have language access only if a sibling or a parent is involved in your very private communications, or in sensitive matters, that some things that might be very sensitive to you and that maybe you wouldn't want your family to know just yet. Or imagine getting a diagnosis for a serious illness like cancer, and your parent or your sibling found out first. Like that's just robbed of you. That that information that belongs to you and you only, and is yours to share, is just taken because of the lack of access, because of the way things were in the beginning. So we have to think that there was no formal training. So there's no sign language classes or interpreter preparation programs before the 1950s and early in the 1960s. And so being paid for interpreting was unheard of. But interpreters were called upon very often. So it was really a lot of volunteer work. And so if we think about it being volunteer work, it really means that because someone's not doing it on an ongoing basis, it really falls on the availability of the person willing to do this favor to be available for whatever it is the situation is, being a special event, an important situation, or even an emergency, right? Um, so this is the lack of access that's happening. Things are really different. But back then, they believed that that was adequate. And so if we think about interpreters, and really we're saying interpreters, they're volunteering for special events. People believe that what's available is enough. But it also means that there's no formal code of conduct. And so the person volunteering for that special event isn't held to the code of professional conduct, as we'll see in a later slide, but they're not held to confidentiality. They're not held to a conflict of interest. They're not held or responsible for their professional ethical boundaries. So things were very different. And what else might have been different? From the consumer perspective, so the lack of training may also mean a lack of skill. So if we don't have training for interpreters, then we don't have an ability to learn specialized vocabulary. We don't have an ability to learn like classifiers and modalities. We don't have an ability to teach onto someone else how to interpret sensitive information, complex information, specialized information. So that specialized knowledge and those skill sets aren't really developed. And so by specialized knowledge and skill sets, I'm thinking, someone interpreting for the police, in an emergency room, even in a classroom. So there really is no opportunity to learn in a separate classroom in a separate environment unless you have a volunteer. Then you're really just stuck to deaf education, and just schools for the deaf. So what does that mean about higher education? Uh, if not for the opportunity to go to Gallaudet, then do you really have opportunities to go to any school? And so there's no code of conduct to offer a guideline. And that applies to the consumer as well. The code of conduct is for the interpreter to follow, but it also lets the consumer know, hey, that interpreter has to maintain confidentiality. And you know this because it's in their code of conduct. So there's no guideline, there's no structure. But it also means it's very limited access. And it's things are only accessible if all the stars aligned perfectly. The person who's willing to give their time happens to be willing to give their time for this important thing that I need them to interpret for. It makes life a little bit difficult, right? And from the interpreter perspective, there's no ability to earn a living as an interpreter, which means it's truly an effort done on your available spare time. So if you're not earning a living as an interpreter, it's all extra. And it also means there's no ability to maintain your skill. There's no reason to seek out information and well, one is where do you find it, but there's no reason to improve your skills because you're really just doing it as a way to give back. And there's no teamwork. So if someone says, I really need someone to help me out, and it turns out to be an all-day situation, there's no concept of I need help. Unless you've thought of it and have asked someone to come help you, but there's no established structure. This is how we team. This is how we take turns. This is how we navigate through this. It's very difficult, right? It's difficult work. It's not just um, no ability to earn a living, but it turns out that work is difficult because we don't have a structure, we don't have training, we don't have a foundation to work from. So what might those working conditions have looked like? I can imagine that it made people think twice about uh, volunteering for things, and maybe that created a more limited access to for the deaf consumer. So it's this give and take. It's this pressure on both and stress on both. And we can see that the community wants to stay connected and the deaf people want access and interpreters want to give access. But it's difficult. The situation and conditions are difficult. So your book mentions that in the era of social consciousness, there's a political event in Muncie, Indiana, and this is where the interpreters that were hired there, they band together to discuss the demand for services and also to create a registry. And so that is really basically what as we'll see later, but the registry of interpreters for the deaf, in the most basic sense, is basically a list of interpreters. It was this ability to connect who's who and who's where because there's such a demand, but the availability and the resources are scarce and limited. The demand is big, so they needed to create a way to connect and find each other. And that's where the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf was born. And as your book mentions, it was originally named the National Registry of Professional Interpreters and Translators for the Deaf, later changed to Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. A constitution and bylaws were adopted, code of ethics drafted. So the code of professional conduct was previously called the code of ethics. And your book mentions that it becomes incorporated, I believe it says 1972. Yes, so it was incorporated in 1972, means it became um, a professional or legal organization and ink attached to the name in 1972. That's not a very long time from today. That's that feels like yesterday. It's very new, which makes us think about how we started this lecture, how new this profession is. Just think about that for a moment. It's so new that this RID became incorporated in the 70s. Now, think about this. It became incorporated, but it doesn't mean that immediately everyone recognized because there's this legal entity, you're now a profession. It still took time. It still took time to influence and trickle out into the world and into society. It's still, I feel, taking time. I still feel like as interpreters, we're always educating the public on our role and on our work. So again, the founders of RID were primarily people with deaf family members, teachers of the deaf, and clergy involved in deaf ministries. So we're going back to the same people who were originally the people called upon to volunteer their time are the same people who then found RID. And really important is the part in the name of for the deaf. And the name of RID has been a source of much deliberation because it can be interpreted as being paternalistic and oppressive. And if you think back to your deaf culture class, it's it takes us back to why are we here? Why are we wanting to become interpreters? And it makes us, we really have to stop and think about the reasons that we're here. I want you all to think about the reasons you're here, but also think about the language that you use when you answer that question for yourselves and even for other people who may ask you why you're wanting to become a sign language interpreter. So you have to ask yourself, why are you here? But look at your language. If the answer to your question, to that question, involves the word help, I want to help the deaf community, I want to help people, I have to tell you, that's the absolute 100% wrong answer. And you may be saying the word help because at this time you don't have another word or another way to express or articulate what you really want to do. But the way the community views itself, guess what? The community has been just fine before you decided to take your classes in ASL. Interpreters are providing service. Deaf people are making their way through life just fine before you decided to take your class and to embark on this journey. So to help the deaf community is the wrong answer because they're not looking for help. They're doing just fine. So you really have to look at your language and really ask yourself why you're here. Why are you taking this class? And why are you in this program? And try for a second to answer and write this down. Take a moment to write this down. But what would your answer be without using that word? Why are you here? Think of what your reasons are, because that is very important. It's not just very important for you to understand, but it's very important to the community to know why you're here. And you will be asked many, many times why it is that you became an interpreter. Throughout your career, you will be asked this question. And it's very important that you understand what your answer is, sincerely and genuinely. So think about it. So the original purpose of RID was, as we mentioned before, it was quite simply to publish a registry of interpreters. Who are they and where are they? Investigating and evaluation and certification systems, and also informing the public about interpreting services. And RID today has a goal of promoting the profession of interpreting and transliterating. And its mission, as you'll see there, I'll give you a second to read the slide. And the third bullet is really important. I want you to really consider this third bullet. RID is committed to increasing the number of interpreters, ensuring they are qualified to practice, and they practice in accordance with professional standards. I'm going to come back to this bullet in a few slides, but I want you to look at they're committed to increasing the number of interpreters. And as we move forward, we're going to think about how this fits in and how the language that they're using here is going to be important to us. So here's the Code of Professional Conduct. And there are 7 tenets. I'm going to read each one, but also give you kind of an idea behind each as I read it. So the first one is interpreters adhere to standards of confidential communication. This means your assignment is completely confidential. You cannot tell the community, or you cannot tell anyone who the deaf person was, even who the hearing person was. You can't say what the situation was. You can say to someone, "Where'd you work today?" "Oh, I work on campus." That's kind of it. You can't say your schedule. You can't say what it is. And the reason is, well, one is that the community has a right to privacy, but the community is so small that if you were to say, "I interpreted a biology class at Cerritos College," like this, people can figure out who the student was. And if you were to later say, "Yeah, that class had a test," immediately people can figure out who had the test and who took a test. Oh, and did they do well, et cetera, et cetera. And so you cannot communicate that kind of information. You can also not communicate who it is you worked with, or if you're an ongoing interpreter, anything, any part of your assignment must remain confidential. You do have people, there is the ability to speak to someone in a professional manner about it. So if you have an interpreter coordinator or your boss, you're able to speak to them. I'll tell you that interpreters still maintain some kind of confidentiality even when speaking to their bosses, unless it becomes a need to know basis. So I have in my own experience been an interpreter coordinator, and even when interpreters came to me, they still maintained confidentiality, and many times they said to me, "There's something I need you to know." So it was like a warning, "Let's close the door." And because it was important, because say it was pertinent to the situation or something I needed to become involved in, that's why they were telling me. But otherwise, I'm not asking and they're not telling because it's confidential information and I don't expect them to tell me. And there were sometimes that they would tell me something and I would say, you shouldn't have told me that." Because we're always kind of watching each other on our ethical boundaries. Number 2, the interpreters possess the professional skills and knowledge required for the specific interpreting situation. It means, and this is very important for you to know now, when you graduate, you're going to be at a certain level of your interpretation skill, and you have to know what you can vie for and compete for in terms of interpreting jobs, and you have to know when to turn it down if offered. So you have to know, hey, I'm not at the level where I can be interpreting for, say, law enforcement. I'm not at the level where I can be interpreting for a complex science class, but I can interpret English lecture with a qualified team. You need to know that. And so starting now is when you need to start to always do self-assessment as to where you are skills-wise. It's very important because it starts now and it doesn't stop. For the rest of your career, you're going to be analyzing where you are in terms of skill and in terms of what you can accept. And it doesn't mean that healthy challenges aren't a good thing, but you have to know what's a healthy challenge and what's not, what's something you're not ready for. It's a very important tenet that you have to be aware of. Number 3, interpreters conduct themselves in a manner appropriate to the specific interpreting situation. So I'll give you an example of, oh, I laugh because I'm like, should I give you this example? Um, concert interpreters. Concert interpreters have to set the tone, have to let let the people understand, hey, this is the vibe we're feeling, and they're dancing. But it doesn't mean that they have to go crazy. They still have to, they're setting the tone without making themselves a show. Um, yeah, I'm thinking of some examples, and you'll probably hate me for not, I cannot tell you that. But people get crazy and they step out of their role and they get drunk and they drink, and it's like, hello, you're the paid person to interpret. Why are you acting crazy like if you're a concert goer? That's the difference. Another thing is, for example, in a classroom setting, interpreters cannot participate. And I have seen it sometimes and I'm kind of like, why are you doing this? Um, where the interpreter answers the question. You're not the student. You're simply there to facilitate communication, which means you do not participate. And so this tenet is very important in the way you conduct yourself while you're interpreting. And I want to add that this also means even while you're a volunteer interpreter. I always say it's no one's business that you're there to volunteer or that you're there for free. The point is that when you're offering interpreting services, you are always acting and conducting yourself, dressing like, and appearing like, speaking like an interpreter, even though you're there as a volunteer, because that's the job that you volunteered for. So you have to fulfill it in that way. Interpreters must demonstrate respect for consumers, respect for colleagues, interns, and students of the profession. I believe those are self-explanatory. Maintain ethical business practices, which really comes to um, avoiding conflicts of interest, avoiding bad practice like charging a consumer or a paying entity for services not rendered, or showing up late and still billing the regular time, that kind of thing. And number 7, engage in professional development. You have now joined a profession not unlike any other, in which you will engage in lifelong learning. The language changes, the language evolves, the world changes, the world evolves. And because of that, we always must seek professional development. There will be other skills that you will seek. There will be other topics and vocabulary that you will look for. And you can only keep up with the profession if you keep on with your professional development. And I always think also, for example, you always want someone who's involved in the profession and involved and engaged in learning to be the model. That's the model interpreter. But that's also, think about this for a second, that's the model professor for you. You need to look at who it is who will be teaching your classes. And I don't just mean now, I mean the future. I'm a working interpreter and I have a depth of knowledge that I can bring you because I'm still involved in the field. And that's what you need to be looking for. As such, I am following the CPC because I'm engaged in professional development, I'm engaged in the field, and I can bring you up-to-date information, not old information. I can bring you what's happening today currently. And look for that with your future professors and your future instructors in your training, because they will give you a different perspective. People who are involved in the field and who seek professional development will give you a different perspective than someone who isn't. And so this is the membership categories for RID. You can see each definition in your book. I just put the standard categories there for you to look at because this means you could be a member today. It also means you could be a member upon graduation. It's something to consider. I understand that it does cost money for membership, but it's something that eventually you will do anyway. So it's for you to think about when you want to consider becoming a member of RID. So RID does administer and maintain certification, the current certification. Um, there are other states. Let me stop for 1 second on this slide. RID is a national organization, and interpreters who are RID certified are nationally certified. For example, I am RID certified. There are some states that have state certification. For example, Texas has the BEI, and in the state of Texas, they will recognize either BEI or RID certification. Um, Certification is important because some jobs will require certification, but it's also a way for you to validate your skill when you're trying to accept an assignment or accept work. So for RID, a person who has passed the written portion of the exam becomes a candidate for certification. And I want to make this distinction is that the certification that RID offers is a generalist certification, which means that it's general entry skills. It's the bare minimum. So think about this. It takes someone some time to become nationally certified. But when you become nationally certified, it's also the bare minimum indication of skill, which means it really takes someone a very long time to become that seasoned and experienced interpreter. This is a lifelong journey. I've been interpreting for over 20 years, and I felt amazing after like 5 years. Looking back, I realized, not so much, but I can see the difference in my interpretation now compared to some time back. Now, that doesn't mean that there wasn't a place for me. You know, I don't believe that every assignment requires amazing stage level interpreter. There's a place for everyone along your journey, but that's why that's why it's important to understand your skill level in order to accept assignments and just to understand where you fit in that journey and in that range. But it's also this for the same reason important to understand that it takes a long time to get there. It takes a really long time to grow that level of interpreter. So going back to the slide, once you become certified, in order to maintain your certification, you must fulfill 80 hours of continuing education for every 4-year cycle. That's about 20 hours a year. And so it's part of the tenets to continue professional development. It's required once you become certified. But you shouldn't wait for certification in order to pursue those kinds of workshops and continuing education. You should always be seeking education for the sake of investing in your career and in your skill, because the more knowledge and more skill that you have, the more opportunity that will spring from that, but also the more networking that you get to do. You got to put yourself out there. People have to get to know your face and get to know your name. And the way they get to see you in the community is by seeing you showing up to events. And I don't just mean showing up to deaf events, I mean show up to professional workshops, show up to interpreter workshops, and and look for the ones that maybe fit your skill level. And if they don't, give it a shot anyway. Maybe you don't participate, but you sit and observe. It's a very important part of your career now. And so you have to look for those kinds of opportunities. There's also the Educational Interpreter Performance Assessment, the EIPA. This is a diagnostic tool developed for educational interpreters. When you take this exam, it provides you feedback and it measures proficiency levels measured from 1 through 5. Um, some places will accept, for example, they may say EIPA required 3.0 and above. For example, Cerritos College will hire an interpreter, and I believe they'll place you at at a level 5 if you're EIPA 4.0 and above. If you're EIPA below that, they don't even kind of recognize EIPA. They place you at a different level. So what I mean by levels is a lot of places, um, entities that you'll work for, be it agencies, colleges, institutions, they have levels of skills and also pay for interpreters, which ranges from certified to skilled, and they'll all each have different descriptions. But depending on where you fall, is where they hire you, is what type of assignments they place you in, but also it determines your rate of pay. So your book is a little bit dated because it says that in 2006, the RID Board of Directors recognized individuals holding EIPA 3 or greater as certified interpreters. I should have put that in quotations, but I took that directly from their book. And I want to give you a little update on this information. This was a great source of contention in the interpreting community because the difference between being an RID certified interpreter or even a state certified interpreter like the BEI that I mentioned before for Texas, that certification requires continuing education. It means if I don't meet my 80 hours in my 4-year cycle, I can potentially lose my certification. However, the EIPA does not require um, professional continuing education. So the question has been, is that really a certified interpreter if there's no requirement for professional education? There's no maintenance of this certification in quotations. And that's the source of contention. Is this a certification if an interpreter is not required to maintain that continuing education? And so today, um, what I see is some organizations will accept, for example, this is EIPA 3 or higher. As I mentioned before, Cerritos College will hire and will take your EIPA at a different level, but they'll only pay level 5, I believe, at 4.0. I believe it's called level 5 at 4.0 or higher. Um, and so some use it as a way to place you in a level. They don't view it as certification, but they do view it as a way to validate your skill and to kind of place you at a certain level. So it's a good thing to get, especially because um, I haven't taken the EIP test. I'm already certified. I hold CICT, which is a certification that is no longer available. What's available now is called the NIC, but um, it was so important for me to get the CICT. I got it right at the end of its lifetime when it was ending. They were phasing it out, and it was important for me to get that distinction because I want to show in my certification when I tell people I hold RID, CICT, what I really am saying is this is how long I've been around. This is how much experience I have without saying this is how much experience I have. And so it's important to get the EIPA may be important for you nonetheless because it's a way to, it's just something to add to your resume, something to validate your skill, but it shouldn't be where you end. Your pursuit should be to become RID certified. I would also like to add that there's currently a push for licensure. There are a few states already that require licensure, and what that means is that the state will require you to have a license in the state in order to um, be involved and engaged and to provide interpreting services. And what that means is in those states that require licensure, which may be California, It means that you are required to have certification in order to obtain a license. This is really important for you, for all of you students now pursuing interpreter studies, because there is a, how do I say, there is a lack of certified interpreters. There are many, many more working interpreters who are skilled and qualified that are not certified than there are certified interpreters. And I should say here, I want to make clear what I feel about certification is certification is important, and you should pursue certification because it says to the community, and it says to you, and it says to me, your colleague, how you feel about your profession and your seriousness and your respect for it. But it, again, if we think back to it being a generalist test, an indication of generalist level skills, certification to me and to many people in the community and to many employers and many agencies does not distinguish you as a skilled interpreter. Your work does, your experience does, and your name does. So I want you to understand that in this field, your reputation is everything. People will get to know the kind of work that you produce, the kind of professional that you are, because they start to see your name and they start to see you showing up. That means more to me and to a lot of people in the community and a lot of professionals in the field than certification. But certification opens doors. Certification gets you work, and certification gets you opportunities. And for those of you following the AB5 law in California, this is going to affect the field of interpreting. Right now, interpreters and captioners do not work as employees or as full-time workers in uh, in the field. It's very hard to get a full-time job as an interpreter. And why I pause is because I realize that in this class we haven't talked about that. So I'm going to make myself a note to make sure we discuss working opportunities. But it's very hard. It's very hard to find full-time work as an interpreter. We'll discuss that. There's a lot of work. You can work over 50, 60 hours. There's some times that I'm so overworked, I have to be mindful to take time off. There is a lot of work, there's a big demand, but there are not a lot of full-time staff jobs, benefited positions. AB5 is a law that aims to change that for everyone, not just for interpreters. Interpreters happen to be included. They're currently pushing for, as I record this video, pushing for an extension for the AB5 law that came into effect in January. And the extension is asking to exempt interpreters and captioners because we are professionals. Other professions have been exempted, like doctors, lawyers, therapists, mental health therapists, etc. But something that the councilwoman mentioned in asking for this extension is we're not professionals if the majority of our profession isn't certified, which is a fact. A lot of interpreters are not certified. If we're granted this extension, how do we become a really truly professional organization? Remember that we're still a very new profession. So this is all new to us. Why aren't most of us certified? Why don't most states require licensure if we're a profession as we deem ourselves to be? And so this extension may lead to California requiring licensure in order to require and prompt and kind of encourage working interpreters to obtain their certification. This is really important to you as students because I'm going to be just fine. I'm a working interpreter that happens to hold certification. And I want to tell you that certification changed my life. It opened doors and opened so many opportunities that were not available to me before I became certified. And it also practically tripled my income. And with my years of experience, my income has just increased. Because remember, it takes a long time to get there. It takes a long time from education to get certification, and then it takes a long time to become that really, really highly skilled interpreter. I finally have reached that. But along the way, I have had these milestones, and certification was one of them. And why this is important to you is because if certification is a barrier for new interpreters, for students who are becoming interpreters, it's already a barrier. Licensure is the next barrier. Now, as a interpreter, require licensure, don't require licensure. As an interpreter, I don't have an opinion. As a professor of students of interpreting, and as a community member, and as a person of color, I think licensure is a barrier to entry for students of color, and for you in this class. It's just going to make it that much harder to become an interpreter. And so I share that with you because you should be involved now and you should know what's going on in the field. But I share that with you also because you got to roll up your sleeves and you got to get to work and you got to deliver because this field in some sense will try to push you out, but we got to push right back in, okay? And so it's really important. It's really important for you to put the effort in into your skill, into your studies, but into your presence as well. This is a slide from the RID 2018 annual report. They call it an annual report, but it really comes out every 2 years. And I want to tell you that this slide, it made me a little bit emotional as I was putting together my PowerPoint. I circled some important numbers for you. The membership total of RIDs, 14,257. We are in California, we are in Region 5. So if you look at the bottom of the slide, I circled how many Hispanic, Latinos, Latinas, 155 in Region 5. And then if you look on the left side of your screen, the membership demographics, out of those 14,000, 8,023 are white. If you look at the number below, 463 are Hispanic. And look at the other numbers. Look at the African American, American Indian, Asian American, etc. And I've trained interpreters for years. And I always pull this report, and it never changes much. And it stings to watch it. And so we just talked about the barriers to entry, and then I show you the numbers. And then I want to go back. I told you in an earlier slide to remember RID is committed to increasing the number of interpreters, ensuring they are qualified to practice and that they practice in accordance with professional standards. They are committed to increasing the number of interpreters, but they are not committed to increasing the diversity in the number of interpreters. And I want to tell you, the thought doesn't it's not it's not hidden to me. The thought does not escape my mind It's very real that I know that it's a very big deal that I'm teaching this class. It's a very big deal that you're taking this class from me. And you will see, you will see in your future education, you will see who your teachers are. You will see who your teachers are, you'll see who your professors are, and the college might not know it, might not think it, but I know it. And I hope that you know it, that it's a really big deal that I'm the teacher for this class and that you're the students in this class. And you'll see it. You will see that there are such barriers to entry, and it's my job to tell you that. And it's my job to prepare you for that, but also to tell you not to give up. It's a very difficult thing to see, but we're in it together. So what I want to say about diversity is that it's not about the photo opportunity. It's important that we look like the community that we serve. It's important that we have a diversity of opinions and perspectives because that's what drives change. Your ideas and your new perspective are going to be so different to mine, and you're going to be that prompt and that drop in the water to cause that ripple effect, to cause that change. That's why we need diversity, uh, to reflect the community that we serve again and reflect their ideas and their beliefs and to look like they do. Something that's not in your book is information about local chapters. For example, our local chapter is actually pretty big, Southern California Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, SCRID. Um, it's important when you look at other chapters to look at their mission. We also have Niobe. I think I want to say that I believe it to be a true disservice from your book not to include information of other organizations, other interpreter professional organizations. Niobe is the National Alliance of Black Interpreters, and I want you to look at the mission. The mission of this organization is to meet the needs of African American Black interpreters in the field of sign language interpreting with respect to recruitment, networking, professional development, moral support, training, and research opportunities. I love Niobe's mission because Niobe's mission is different from RID's mission. Niobe recognizes the need for diversity, and they recognize the need to offer moral support in this field. And the fact that we don't get to learn about this from the book is a big disservice. Mano a Mano is an organization for trilingual interpreters. That's interpreters mostly working in English, Spanish, and American Sign Language. And they have their own trilingual interpreter directory that you can join. It used to be you could join without being a member. I'm not sure now if membership is required. So these professional organizations are member driven. That means that they are what you make of it. If you volunteer your time because you got these great ideas and your great idea becomes a mission, becomes an event, or becomes a service they provide, it starts from the volunteer who suggested it to begin with. And so because of this, I want to emphasize to you that you must become involved. You must participate in your profession. Your book mentions spoken language interpretation and that it evolved primarily through political events. And as you see there, early practitioners were civil servants, etc. Um, this is really important to understand for two reasons. Spoken language interpretation also has high level of training and degrees that are offered just like American Sign Language, but it's really important to understand where spoken language interpretation came from and its roots and its history, especially if you're looking to become a trilingual interpreter. So spoken language interpreting, its normal process, as your book says, started with consecutive interpreting and progressed through technology um, to simultaneous interpreting. It's really important to understand spoken language interpretation and the training. I think there's a big misunderstanding from the sign language interpreting community to the spoken language interpreting community because there is vast training as well. And many people in the sign language field say spoken language interpreters don't have a code of conduct. Yes, they do. They have training and specializations just as we do. And your book in the review portion of of your of your chapter said that spoken language interpreters often get paid more than sign language interpreters. I believe that your book is very dated in that way because in my experience, a certified experienced sign language interpreter earns a lot more than a spoken language interpreter. But also when it comes to spoken language interpreting, it depends on the language. It depends on the availability of, is the market saturated with Spanish spoken language interpreters compared to maybe like a Creole interpreter or a African language interpreter, etc. And so really that's where the rate structure comes in. But in the end, uh, sign language interpreters are very uh, very well paid, and in my experience, do earn more than spoken language interpreters. It's because of even though we're a new profession, we have set ourselves up in this way of a standard um, payments, standard expectations, and um, and I believe that interpreters really have a great opportunity to make a great living. So now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about some leadership. I've taken some quotes from some interpreters and or community members that I know, and along the way we'll see them in this video. So we'll start with Alejandra, and Alejandra is a certified interpreter and also a trilingual interpreter, and this is what she believes leadership to mean. So I want to ask you what self-determination is, and if you've taken deaf culture, excuse me, if you've taken deaf culture class, we know self-determination and we speak about self-determination in terms of the deaf community. But for the purpose of this lecture and the rest of this video, I want to speak in terms of self-determination in terms of you as a professional and as an student of interpreting working to become an interpreter. So self-determination in the most basic dictionary definition is the right of the people to choose the form of government and or governing they will have, which basically means the freedom to make your own choices. So here's a test of where we are in self-determination. So we have to think and imagine this to be the spectrum. Do we say to ourselves, I'm so thankful that there are other professionals with the knowledge and skills to make decisions on our behalf. I'm so thankful for an organization to decide that California needs to require licensure. I'm so thankful that somebody else made that decision, even though it may become a barrier to entry. And or are we a step further where to ourselves we say, you know what, isn't it time they polled and asked people, which means asking me my opinion? But to those in authority, we say, you know, it would be nice in your decision making if you would include us and our perspective. And then the next step closer to self-determination is to actually say to those in authority, you need us at the table. You need to include us in your discussion. But from them, we may still, in that situation, still get, don't worry about it. We got you covered. We've considered you in our discussion. And so along in that spectrum, a closer way to get to that self-determination is to say to them, no, I don't think so. We will be at the table for this discussion, and to get the backtrack from those people in authority to like, oh, you're upset. Maybe we should have invited them. Um, but a closer step to that self-determination is to get those people to see us, those people in authority, those people who are decision makers, to see us from the get-go and say, you know what, let's make sure so-and-so's at this meeting and make sure they're invited to this table. And for us to respond and say, I'll be there Tuesday. That is a continuum of self-determination. And that's where we want to be. We want them to see us and we want to be able to respond and to be present. So in this field and in that self-determination continuum, I want you to think about as a student of interpreting, but just as a community member also, where do you operate from? Do you operate from, maybe they'll ask me, you're sure glad someone else is making those decisions, or do you operate from, see me, I'm here, and I will participate? That's a really important distinction and a really important thought for you to have and to consider where you operate from and where you want to operate from. So the continuum is there in an abbreviated form. We want to move away from being thankful for others for making the decision. We want to move away from being thankful for others for including us in their decision making. And I want to be away from banging on the door and saying, you need me at the table. I want to be already at the scheduling talk to say, I will be there. And I want that decision-making person, authority, and organization to see us from the get-go. So let's talk about some definitions. A leader is a person who guides or inspires others. An ally is a person or group associated by common cause or purpose. A person who associates or cooperates with another, which is basically a supporter. An advocate is a person that argues for a cause, a supporter or defender, a person who pleads for a cause or propounds an idea. An agent of change is an agent is defined as the one who acts or may have the power of authority and the social capital. That means a person who has reach. And a champion is a person who's got the money and has the opportunity to provide to the advocate, to the ally, to the agent of change, and to the leader. So quickly, I'll let you read this other. Francisco tells us what his idea of leadership is. I'll give you a second to read that. And as we see others' definition and idea of leadership, think about what yours is going to be. So now, on your paper, take a moment to write the name of a person in your educational experience. It could be a professor, a tutor, a classmate. It could be a counselor, the person at the admissions office. Just think of a person in your educational experience that you think of as a leader. Now, write the name of a person in your educational experience. It could, again, professor, tutor, classmate that you think of as an ally. Now, you're going to write the name of a person, still focus on educational experience, who you think of as an ally, but who has talked you off the ledge in some kind of freak out moment. You were going to drop this class, you were going to just not even submit that assignment, you were going to drop out of school, whatever the case. They were an ally and talked you off the ledge in that freak out moment. Who is that person? And write their name. Now, write the name of a person who has given you great support. This time it could be academically or otherwise. Write the name of a person who has influenced you, academically, professionally, or personally. Now write the name of someone who has offered or guided you through an opportunity. Okay, now we're going to turn this around to you. Draw a symbol, like just give you some ideas for the symbol. For the following statements if you have done the following. And the first statement is draw a symbol if you have mentored someone. It could be in anything in your lifetime if you mentored someone. Draw a symbol if you chose personal time over accepting another shift or another work opportunity, another job. You decided, you know what, I need a day for myself. Draw a symbol if you have wanted to cancel something like at the last minute. I don't want to go to this dinner. I don't want to join this Zoom get together. But you pulled yourself out of that feeling and you didn't cancel. You showed up. Draw a symbol if you have volunteered at least 10 hours within the last year. This could be for a professional organization or otherwise. Draw a symbol if you took a step back to let someone else shine. You had an opportunity, you could have kept it, but you had someone else in mind and you let them take it. And you said, let me refer you, let me connect you. This opportunity is for someone else. Here is why I asked you to answer those questions for with the names of other people, but also to answer the questions for yourselves. We are all connected. The names of the people you may have answered in the questions previously, maybe people who are close to you, maybe people who you have a relationship with at work, at school, etc., and who you will continue to have a relationship most probably. And the point is that we are all connected. But also for the questions of yourself, the reason I asked those questions and for you to draw a symbol is to remind you that you're already a leader. You're already making good choices, and you're already making thoughtful choices and making thoughtful progress. But I want to remind you that you cannot be a leader of one. We are in a community and we're connected. You're going to always be part of my story, and I'm going to be part of your story. Be it a little drop or a big influential one, because the remainder of the semester remains to be seen. But I can't be, if I view myself as a leader, I can't lead myself. I can't be like, I'm so amazing and no one is listening. I have influence over no one. Um, and neither can you. We need community to do that. And I cannot be an ally if I don't actually engage. And I cannot be an advocate if I don't actually connect. I can't be a champion if I don't actually have an opportunity and give it willingly. So I want you to think about, as you move forward in your profession, in your career, and in your education, to continue to be that leader. But remember that we can't do it selfishly, and we cannot do it without being engaged in the community, and for the purposes of this class, without being engaged in the profession. So I want to hit some definitions that are important to us, which are what are ethics? They're principles of conduct that help govern behaviors of individuals and groups. Remember that RID used to call its code of professional conduct the code of ethics. And many organizations and professions have their own code of ethics, which is again the principles that govern, their group's behavior and their professional behaviors is really what we're talking about. Cultural values. This is what, in our own culture, as we talked about, the way we're raised, the environment we're exposed to, this tells us what is good and what ought to be good based on our community and cultural values. And ethical judgments, that focuses on the degree of rightness and the degree of wrongness of human behavior. So nothing is ever black and white and absolutely concretely wrong or absolutely and concretely right. And so it's important to understand our own ethics, our own cultural values, and our own ethical judgments, because this will influence the weight of the CPC in our own work. I want to remind us of the demographic information that we saw for the membership in RID. I want to remind us of the organizations that we saw that focus on other groups and belonging in the field of interpreting, and look at the US Census, which I know we're currently working on a census now. The last time when this was published was as of July of 2012, which was the Hispanic population was at 53 million. So it makes up 17% of the nation's total population, which makes it the nation's largest minority group. The Hispanic population in the United States is the second largest, ranking second to Mexico, which has 112 million, which is the only other larger Hispanic population worldwide. And our demographics for RID said that 463 members out of 14,000 plus were Hispanic Latinos. There's something wrong. Either RID is not attracting us, or we don't feel welcome, or we don't feel like it's necessary, or we don't feel like that's a pursuit in our own professional goals. We must be hiding, or there's a really big barrier to entry to the interpreting profession, or both. But if this is the face of the United States today, it also means that this is the community that we're serving, especially local to our area. And I think that is such a disservice, and it saddens me to think that the service providers do not look like the community that they're serving. This is really important for you all to understand, that the struggle continues, and you will struggle. And I have made my own commitment to be an ally and to be an agent of change. And it's my responsibility to tell you what we're facing, but it's your responsibility also to understand and act on it. Here's another quote from Leonardo, who is also a nationally certified interpreter. He's also actually a professor on the East Coast. I'll give you a second to read his information. I want to show you this slide, which I say that I understand it's unfair for me to show it, and it's a little dramatic, but I'm showing it with intention and to make a point. This is published in 2005. 40 deaf and hard of hearing stakeholders, which means that they were deaf, hard of hearing interpreters, people involved in the community who created standard competencies and published them. And I want you to look at those last names. Some of those names have come up in videos that you may have seen in movies from deaf culture, people you may have met or networked with, read about. I don't see any Hispanic, Spanish, Latino last name there. That's in 2005. I just, I want you to think about that. And I want you to remember this as you become involved in your profession. And remember how much you want to contribute. Think about how much you want to contribute to the profession and to your future and to the future of interpreting as a whole. And it comes to this. I had to show you that slide because by understanding our history, we understand our identity. I had to tell you the history as it was given to us in the book, but I had to add this other information. It is my responsibility to tell you this history. It is my responsibility to tell you what you're facing so that we can understand where we're at. And it's my responsibility to tell you that identity and belonging matters. If we feel we identify or have a sense of belonging to a group, then we feel like we're not alone. This is why groups like Mano a Mano and Niobe and other organizations that have developed and set themselves up to support interpreters, a specific group, it's important because when we feel connected and we feel we identify, then we don't feel like we're sinking and we don't feel like we're so alone in this field. This also helps our group to be seen. If we think back to that litmus test, the self-determination as professionals, the goal is to be seen. So I want to encourage you to make an effort to connect with these organizations, with other students of interpreting, with interpreters, and build now a sense of pride. You have to start to tell your stories now. First, as the statement says there, once you've worked through them. If it's something that you feel scarred with, if it's something that's traumatic and you haven't resolved, don't tell that story. That's yours alone still, and it's still yours to work through. But if it's something that you're okay sharing now, it's your responsibility to tell your story. It was my responsibility to tell you my story and to tell you that I understand how big and how important it is for me to teach this class. It's my responsibility to share that with you and to share with you the demographics and to share with you the barriers to entry. Because that's without understanding we can't move forward, and that's important for you to understand now. And the only way that we can change anything is by allowing our communities to be seen. I have to tell you how big it is for me to teach this class, but equally important and equally my responsibility is to see this opportunity and to teach this class, not to turn it down, to say, yes, I can do it. Because we have to be seen. I have to be seen. I have a responsibility to be seen because of my commitment to the field and to the community. But to you also, to you as students, I've already made this commitment. Here's another quote I'd like you to take a second to read. I took this opportunity to talk about leadership in this lecture because it has to start now. Some of you have already been told you will never be an interpreter. I have heard these comments. Some of you have already experienced hardship and struggles, and it doesn't mean that you're not required to put in effort or that quality work isn't expected of you. That's an aside. But right now, in our minds, we already have to believe and to see where we belong in this field, in this community, and just where our place is and where we want our place to be. It starts up here and then it moves on to our actions. I want to tell you a story. And this guy, Chef Mario Cristerna, he doesn't even know that I have been talking about him for a few years now. He doesn't even know that he's part of my presentation. But some time ago, I met a chef that was his teacher. And the chef told me the story and it inspired me. And so I've told the story ever since. So, Chef Mario was one of those kids that he just couldn't find his place in the world. He cussed a lot when he talked, and he didn't have direction in life. He didn't have any sense of where he was headed. But at home, what made him feel good was he was the one that would always cook for his family. Because he learned this from his mom and from his grandmother. And so this chef told me that this was a chef at a culinary school. That at one point he decided, you know what, this is my thing. I'm gonna train to be a chef. So he joined this culinary school, and he was still the outsider. Nobody really wanted to work with him because he was weird and he was still that street kid, and every other word out of his mouth was the F word, and he was still that guy from the streets. But he would still show up, and no one believed that he would move forward. And at one point, toward the end of their training, everyone had to connect with a place they were going to do. I don't know the right word in culinary school, but some kind of apprenticeship. So everybody was kind of getting paired up with who they were going to meet with. And the chef asked everyone, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to this place. I'm going to this place. I'm going to this place. Everybody had a place or a restaurant that they were going to do their continued training with. And when the chef professor of the school asked Mario, Mario said, I'm going to Spain. And he had the name of someone he wanted to learn with. And of course, because he's still the street guy and the street kid, he brushed him off. Whatever, sure, he's going to. But he did. About 2 years later, Mario came to visit the professor, the chef professor, and said what happened. He said he went to Spain to see the chef that he wanted to study under, and he went to his restaurant. And that day, he asked for the chef by name, and the chef himself said he's not here. Come back later. So Mario says, oh, I'll just wait. He waited all day, and he was still there at closing time. And he asked again, is he here? I want to talk to him. And the chef said, fine. What do you want? So it explains why he's there. He's like, I followed your cooking. I want to learn under you, etc. And the chef ends up saying, yes, start with washing the dishes. So Mario stayed there for, whatever his time was, 1 or 2 years, and he came back. And he ended up opening his restaurant. He was known as the chef that slept in the kitchen because while his restaurant was being built and renovated to be what he wanted to do when he opened, he had a mattress in the kitchen and he slept there. And he came back to tell that story, And when someone asked him how he measured success, Chef Mario said, I measure success by the look on my mom's face when she walks into the restaurant. It's not the money, it's not the experience, and not where I've been. It's my mom, the way she looks at me. And the reason I share that story with you is that you can learn anything through books. You can submit your assignments, and I don't know if you're half reading things or half understanding. You can get every degree available to you. You can get all the initials at the end of your name with all the certifications. But there's one thing really important. I can't teach you passion. You can't take a class on passion. You cannot get a degree on passion. And I need you to ask yourself, do I have passion for the profession that I have chosen to study? And where does it come from? Which goes back to the question of why are you here? And I want you to ask yourself, am I contributing to my own educational experience? Am I really satisfied with the effort that I'm putting forward? And am I reaching out to my other classmates? And am I being an ally to them? Am I being an advocate to them? Which in the end really comes to, am I choosing to be seen as a student of interpreting, as a future interpreter? This is your choice now. You can you can remain hidden and remain invisible, or you can come forward and choose to be seen. And then the question is, do I act with passion or do I react when I'm dissatisfied? Do I complain after when things didn't work out? Or from the get-go, have I put my effort in and have I put my focus because I'm acting with passion? And so you have to think about, when it comes to action or reaction, what gives you the most choices? To act ahead of time, to give yourself time to change things, or to react and react too late sometimes? And what helps to build your community? To act with time or to react when it's too late? But really importantly, which allows you to shape your narrative? I touched on only very briefly in this lecture how your reputation is everything in this field. By shaping it now, you shape your own narrative. By telling your story, you shape your own narrative. By me telling my story, I'm shaping my narrative instead of allowing others to assume or allowing someone else to tell my story. So, which is more effective? To act now with passion or to react when we're not satisfied? And that's the true question. So, I want you to have purpose. Think about what being a leader means to you. As we saw along this presentation, other people's definition of leadership, what does it mean to you? What kind of leader do you admire? Remember those names you wrote down in those questions before? Look at those names now and look at what character they have, or what they share, what values they have, or what in them made you write their name, which may lead you to understand what kind of leader you admire and lead you to understand what kind of leader you want to be. Because understand this, when you feel that you have a purpose that's greater than us, we will be resilient. We will persevere. We will push through those barriers. And ask yourself this question: Is this a career that you're embarking on, or is it a job? And ask yourself, why are you here? Why are you in this class? Why are you taking this training? Why have you chosen this major? And check your language. See if you can answer that without using the word help. And ask yourself if you have the passion to create change. So we're almost toward the end. We're gonna hit on some leadership styles. Autocratic leader, someone with a high level of power over teams. This usually tends to be like a manager or a boss. Bureaucratic leaders, they follow the rules and make sure everyone on the team is following the rules. This could be like the assistant manager or the person usually under the boss who kind of makes sure everyone's following. And if you think of a work example, it might be the person that checks, did you take your break? Okay. They just kind of check in, but they're still kind of in the leadership capacity. A charismatic leader keeps everyone excited. Here's another thing you can't teach. You cannot teach charisma. Charismatic leaders just kind of emerge. It's in their nature, it's in their energy, and many times people naturally follow them. And the important thing for them is to understand that people naturally follow them and to then lead by example. Let me go back there and that second sentence that says it carries a lot of responsibility and long-term commitment. Someone who knows they're a charismatic leader, they have to make the commitment to be a leader because they understand their influence on others. So going to democratic leaders, that's someone who invites others to contribute, invites a dialogue, invites discussion, make sure everyone's satisfied for having given their feedback before making a decision. And then there's a laissez-faire leader, which delegates to others but offers guidance. And why I talked about these leadership styles. We think about the leader, we discussed who you thought was a leader, then we discussed what kind of leader you want to be. And I want to remind you of all those leadership styles. There isn't just one leadership style. There's the leader that emerges from within to fit any given situation, which means sometimes you're the charismatic leader, and sometimes you're the bureaucratic leader. Sometimes you're the laissez-faire leader offering guidance. But the important part is to know which kind of leader and leadership is required in the situation so that that one can emerge and can fit the moment. So for another reflection is to think about what shapes your ability to contribute and to do something beyond yourself. And what I mean by that is, for me, what makes me want to contribute and what makes me want to do something that's bigger than me and bigger than just making a quick buck. The idea of giving back and the idea of understanding my own journey and wanting to influence the next generation, that shapes my ability to contribute. So think about this for yourself, is how do you make those ideas and those goals, those visions and those dreams, how do you make them actually happen? Well, I'll tell you, this is a start. Taking this class in this setting, online, watching my videos, I understand. I completely understand that I've made you watch this video, this long video, that I can only hope captured your attention for some of it. I understand that's difficult. It's part of you taking action and it's commendable. And I want to tell you now, right before it ends, thank you for watching. That's already a big part. But I want to tell you that I want you to make a decision, because the moment you decide to act, then you've given it meaning. And making a decision is only the beginning of this ongoing, forever, lifelong growth and learning that you will do. But make a decision to be a leader. I have made a decision to be your ally and to be your advocate. And I've made a decision to try to provide you quality content, thoughtful lectures. I want to pass on to you important information that I think will benefit you, that I hope you connect with. I've made that decision, and I know I can sometimes just be like, make up some assignment, click, and that'll be what you do. But it's important to me to connect these topics and this information. And I think that I'm doing what I've set out to do. So I'm asking you to make a decision now to be a leader, to be engaged, and to be active, to contribute something beyond yourself. But being a leader also means being effective. So you gotta manage your time. Do not overcommit. And that includes if you're taking a big load, don't take too much. Don't do too much. But if you have committed, follow through on your commitment. Someone on the other end is depending on you. And respond to communication in a timely manner. This is a reminder to me. I'm looking at consider 24 to 48 hours. Looking right back at me. Effective leadership. I need these reminders too. But this also means always be looking out for the other classmate that needs a hand and extend your hand to them. And view volunteer opportunities, things related to sign language, professional events, deaf community events, as networking opportunities. Start to show up like an interpreter, not like a student. Think like an interpreter. Think like this is your career. Act like this is your career. Be a team player. Be a leader and be an ally.